Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Tik-A method for the second video in my two-part video series on simple time signatures. Now, if you haven't checked out my last video, week 18, it's really important that you do so before proceeding here, because in the last video, I went over exactly what simple time signatures are, how to recognize them in music notation, how to decipher them, how to subdivide the beats and read rhythms. Because in today's video, week 19, we're just going to analyze two more simple time signatures that are a little less common, but a little more fun. So I hope you'll stick around for the whole video. Let's get started. And here we are at the first page of week 18 and week 19. And again, in the last video, I went over this page in great detail, talking about what simple time signatures are, what it means to be duple, triple, quadruple, and how to read rhythms in those different time signatures. So if you haven't checked out that video, it's so important that you do that before proceeding here, because we're going to get right to the exercises. But before I get to that first exercise for today, I did want to bring to your attention that for weeks 18 and 19, I have a section in my book where I talk about the incorporation of invisible bar lines into these simple time signatures. How do invisible bar lines work in simple duple, in simple triple, and in simple quadruple time? We know that invisible bar lines are so helpful for us as musicians to compartmentalize measures and help us decipher rhythms. We also now know that common time, 4/4 time, is simple quadruple time. Now, all this being said, I'm actually not going to be going over invisible bar lines and simple time signatures in this video. These videos are only intended to be supplemental resources to my book. That's why it's so important that you go out and get my book, because there's so much more information in there than what's in these videos. So go check it out. There's also a section on some common exceptions to these invisible bar line rules in these simple time signatures. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to our first exercise for today. And here we are at exercise 19C, where we have a 3/2 time signature, a simple triple time signature. We have 3 beats in the measure. The half note gets the beat or the pulse, and each one of those half notes can be divided into 2 equal quarter notes. Now, a lot of the exercises in week 18 and week 19, what I've done, there's some intentionality behind it. The first measure will have the pulse note. In other words, the note that gets the beat. So here in this particular exercise, you'll see that there's 3 half notes, because that half note is going to get the beat. In the second measure of these exercises, I often put the subdivision of those beats into that second measure. So in this case, you'll see that there's 6 quarter notes, because each one of the 3 half notes can be divided into 2 quarter notes. And in the third measure, I try to have a note last the entire length of the measure. And in 3/2, a dotted whole note is the note that lasts the entire measure. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into the analysis of exercise 19C before we perform it. So, as I just mentioned, the first measure is the pulse. So we're going to have 3 half notes here. Each one of those half notes are going to fall on the metronome click, because the half note is getting the beat. Ta, ta, ta. That's what the first measure will sound like. The second measure is the subdivision of those half notes. So beat 1 will fall here, beat 2 will fall here, beat 3 will fall here. Here's what measure 2 would sound like. 1, ready, and ta, 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 ta. All right, so we're subdividing a little bit differently here. We have to recognize that the half note's getting the beat in 3/2 and the quarter note's getting the subdivision. Now, we could have an entire conversation on why a composer would choose to write a piece in 3/2 as opposed to 3/4, or why they would choose 3/8 instead of 3/2. That's a conversation for another time. Just know that although this time signature is less common, you will see it in music notation. It does happen. So let's move on to the third measure. Talk a little bit about this dotted whole note. So this dotted whole note, let's think about what a dot does when it's placed to the right-hand side of a note head. It increases its value by half. So a whole note, let's talk about it in quarter notes, since that's what we recognize from 4/4 time. A whole note gets 4 quarter notes. Okay? If we take half of that, which is 2, and add it to itself, we have 6 quarter notes happening in a dotted whole note. However, we're in 3/2. So I'm going to draw how we should be thinking about a whole note in 3/2, or a dotted whole note in this case. So if we have a dotted whole note right here, that's equivalent to 3 half notes. 1, 2, 3. The original whole note would get these 2 half notes right here. A half of that is 1 half note. So we're adding this half note to it. That's why a dotted whole note is the full value of a 3/2 measure, because it's equivalent to 3 half notes or 6 quarter notes. So I hope that makes sense to you, but that's the value of a dotted whole note. Let's move on to measure 4. We have a quarter note here on beat 1, a quarter rest on the upbeat of beat 1, then we have a quarter note on beat 2, a quarter rest on the upbeat of beat 2, and then a quarter note on beat 3, and then another quarter rest on the upbeat of beat 3. Notice how I'm subdividing these beats into quarter notes, whereas in common time, all of our subdivisions were eighth notes. Again, when we see 3/2, we have to be thinking about it in terms of half notes getting the beat and quarter notes getting the subdivision. It's very interesting and can be challenging for new students, but I know that you can do it. So let's keep moving. Let's go on to measure 5. In measure 5, or the first measure on the second line, we've got the first beat happening on this quarter rest. On the upbeat of beat 1, we have this quarter note. Then on beat 2, we have another quarter rest. And then on the upbeat of beat 2, we have 2 eighth notes. Now, we're going to keep those as TT, even though they're going to be a little bit faster, and I'll demonstrate in a moment. On beat 3, we've got this quarter note, and then on the upbeat of beat 3, we have another quarter note. So let me demonstrate for you what measure 5 would sound like. I'll give us a 3-beat count off. 1, ready, and ta, TT, ta, ta. Let me do that one more time. You can do it along with me. 1, ready, and ta, TT, ta, ta. So you can hear how I'm keeping the Tik-A-Tee verbiage the same and just incorporating it into this new time signature. Let's move on to measure 6. We have 4 eighth notes happening here on beat 1. Okay, and then beat 2 will be this half note. And then beat 3 will be this half rest. Again, we're not going to change the Tik-A-Tee verbiage for those eighth notes. Tik-A, tik-A, ta, no. T-T-T-T-ta, yes. Okay? A lot of the systems out there, the vocalization of rhythms, will change the verbiage used when you go into a different time signature, such as 3/2. In the Tik-A-Tee method, I don't change the verbiage, so that eighth notes are always going to be T. We can say T-T-T-T-ta. So why change it to confuse students and make that 16th notes? It doesn't make sense to me. So let's move on to measure 7. We have a half rest on beat 1. We've got this quarter note on beat 2, this quarter note on the upbeat of beat 2. We've got a tie here on beat 3, which I'll parenthesize, and then we'll say the remainder of this eighth note, which is T, 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 to take up that beat. Let's say measure 7. 1, ready, and rest. Ta, ta, T, T, T. I'll do it again. 1, ready, and rest. Ta, ta, T, T, T. So it actually is not that crazy or that complex once you hear it done. And then in the last measure, we have a quarter note on beat 1. We have a quarter rest on beat 2 with this quarter note coming in on the upbeat of beat 2. And then we're landing on beat 3 with this half note. I would write -1 here, so I hold that out full value. I hope you're beginning to wrap your head around looking at these measures with the half notes getting the beat and the quarter notes getting the subdivision. Eighth notes, although they may feel and sound like 16th notes, they're still going to be said as eighth notes. They're going to be said as T, T. Okay? All right, we've analyzed this a bunch here. Let's go perform it with a metronome and see what it sounds like. All right, I'm actually going to leave the ink on the page for this exercise instead of deleting it all, because I think in this case, being such a new rhythmic concept with a half note getting the beat and the quarter note getting the subdivision and there being 3 beats in each measure, I think in this case the ink will actually help us perform it better so we can see exactly what's happening in every one of these measures. I'm going to stick with the metronome from violinlounge.com. So again, a huge shout out to those folks for offering up a free online metronome. You'll notice that I have it on the number 3. That's because there's 3 beats or 3 pulses in each measure. So there'll be a little bit of an accent on each beat 1 as we go through this exercise. I'm going to be singing this on a G3. You're welcome to join me on that note, an octave higher, an octave lower, or a different note altogether. Let's get the metronome started. I'm at 70 beats per minute, or the half note equals 70 in this case. Here's my G3. And the count off that I'll be using here is a 1 ready and. Because we're in 3-2 and there are 3 beats per measure, I want to give a 3 beat count off. That's where 1 ready and will come into play. So I hope you'll vocalize this rhythm with me because I'm going to give us our count off. Here we go. 1 ready and ta 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 ti ti ta ta ti 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 ta 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 ti 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 ta ta ta. All right, let's stop that metronome. I hope you're starting to wrap your head around the concept of 3-2 and the half note getting the beat and the quarter note being the subdivision of that beat. It can be tricky at first, but the more you do this, the easier it is to adapt to different time signatures. Okay, we vocalized exercise 19C with a metronome. We now know that it's time to go find that MP3 to 19C to make sure that we did it correctly. Let's go do that together right now. All right, here we are at my website where you can find all 363 of the MP3s that accompany my book. Now, after you vocalized an exercise with a metronome, the next step is to navigate your way to my website, find that exercise's MP3, and you have one of 3 options once you find it. Number 1, just listen to the MP3 and check for your accuracy that way. Option number 2, vocalize the exercise again along with the MP3. Or option 3, and the most crucial step in this process, is to break out your instrument and play along with the MP3. Especially if your instrument isn't primarily the voice. You must play these exercises on your instrument before proceeding to the next rhythmic exercise or rhythmic concept. Okay, so you know your options, 1, 2, or 3. It's time to make that decision because without further ado, I'm going to press play on exercise 19C. One, 2, 3, 1, ready, and. Ta 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 ti ti ta ta ti 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 ta 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 ti 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 ta ta ta. And there you have it, my friends, exercise 19C. Now, if you did not choose option 3, which is playing it on your instrument, now is the time to do that before moving on to the next exercise. And just like I did for week 18, I'm going to perform exercise 19C with some vocal harmony before we go to that next exercise. I hope you enjoy. 1, 2, 3, 1, ready, and. Ta 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 ti ti ta ta ti 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 ta 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 ti 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 ta ta ta. All right, here we are at the next exercise, another simple time signature. However, we're going the opposite direction here. We had the half note getting the beat or the pulse in 3/2. Well, here we've got the eighth note getting the beat. We have a simple quadruple time signature with 4/8. There are 4 beats in the measure. The eighth note will get the beat or the pulse, and that eighth note will be equally divided into 2 16th notes. So now we have to visualize this new time signature with the eighth note getting those metronome clicks and the 16th note being the division of those beats. Okay, let's dive a little bit deeper and analyze this exercise. And as I've done in previous exercises for week 18 and week 19, I've filled the first measure with the note that gets the beat or the pulse. And in this case for 4/8, it's the eighth note. So each one of these eighth notes will get a beat, and you'll hear a metronome click fall on every one of those eighth notes. And in the second measure, I've filled it with the subdivision of that eighth note, which can be equally divided into 2 16th notes. So there'll be 8 16th notes in measure 2. And here's where the beats will fall. Beat 1 will be here, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. Now, the Tik-A verbiage doesn't change, as I said for exercise 19C. So here's what measures 1 and 2 would sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4. T, 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 Tik-A, 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 Tik-A. And there it is. Very straightforward, very easy to adapt to a new time signature in the Tik-A verbiage. Moving on to measure 3, we've got a quarter note here. Now in 4/8 time, a quarter note is still 2 eighth notes long, but a quarter note is equivalent to a half note in 4/4 time because it's going to get 2 beats. Okay, so a quarter note is going to get beat 1 and beat 2 here because a quarter note can be broken down into 2 eighth notes, and since every eighth note gets a beat, we have 2 beats for a quarter note. Very interesting, and we've got to wrap our head around this new time signature. So beat 3 will fall on this second quarter note, and that will be held over through beat 4. Now we also have a tie going into measure 4. And we have a half note. And as you guessed it, a half note fills up an entire measure in 4/8. Why? Because a half note is equivalent to 2 quarter notes, which is also equivalent to 4 eighth notes. So a half note in 4/8 time fills up an entire measure. So I could write 1, 2, 3, 4 over that entire measure, and I would parenthesize it all because since we have that tie, I'm not going to be re-articulating the downbeat of that half note in the 4th measure. So it's going to be a very long note that will last 6 beats in total. So I hope this is making sense to you. Let's move on to measure 5 and keep going. All right, for these last 4 measures, I'm just going to place the beats above the measures so you can see exactly where that metronome is going to click. So in measure 5, we'd have beat 1 happening right here over this 8th rest, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. Going on to measure 6, beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. Going on to measure 7, we've got these 2 16th notes happening on beat 1. On beat 2, we've got an 8th rest. On beat 3, we've got an 8th rest. And on beat 4, we have 2 more 16th notes. Okay? Moving into measure 8, beat 1, beat 2, and then beats 3 and 4 will be that quarter note. As we discussed earlier, a quarter note gets 2 metronome clicks or 2 beats in 4/8 time. So this is a pretty straightforward second line to this exercise, and it's going to sound like quarter notes and eighth notes sound in common time, but we're going to be using the Tik-A verbiage in 4/8, so we're going to have T's and Tik-As in 4/8 that will be going along with the metronome. You'll see what I mean when we perform the exercise. Let's go throw a metronome on and do it right now. And just like I did for exercise 19C, I'm going to leave the ink on the page for this one. The fact that we're in 4/8 time, I think it's going to help us see where all those beats are landing and those 16th note subdivisions, as well as the longer notes, especially the ones that incorporate a tie. So I'm going to leave the ink on the page here. I do think it'll be helpful. I'm going to leave the metronome at 70 beats per minute, or in this case, the 8th note equals 70. And I'm going to sing it on my typical G3 pitch. I hope you'll join me. Let's get the metronome started. Here we go. Here's the G3. And I changed the metronome to 4 so that there's a little accent on the first beat of every measure. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, and T, 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 Tik-A, 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 ta, ta, T, 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 Tik-A, 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 ta. All right, let's stop the metronome. You probably heard I had the 16th notes. I performed them a little bit more staccato to really emphasize the subdivision of that 8th note. I hope you joined me in this exercise. Now that we vocalized this rhythm along with the metronome, we know the next step is to find that MP3 for exercise 19H and check for our accuracy. So let's go do that together right now. All right, here we are back at my website where you can find all the MP3s. We, of course, are all queued up for exercise 19H, and you should know which of the 3 options you're going to choose before I press play. So without further ado, here we go. One, 2, 3, 4. T, 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 Tik-A, 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 ta, ta, T, 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 Tik-A, 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 ta. And there it is, exercise 19H. And you know what I'm going to say. If you haven't chosen option 3, which is playing this exercise on your instrument, you need to do that before moving on to the next exercise or rhythmic concept. And before we head to the outro, let's have one more vocal performance. And here it is, 19H. One, 2, 3, 4. T, 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 Tik-A, 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 ta, ta, T, 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 Tik-A, 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 ta. And that does it for week 18 and week 19, my 2-week rhythmic concept on simple time signatures. And stay tuned for the next video for week 20 when I dive into another simple time signature that many students don't find so simple at first because it looks like common time. It looks like 4/4 time, but it's not. It's 2/2 or cut time, or more fancy than that, alla breve. Thank you so much for sticking around for the whole video. I do hope you performed those exercises with me. I hope you learned a little bit more about 3/2 and 4/8 and simple time signatures in general. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and that notification bell so you get the latest video, and leave a comment if you're inspired to do so. I will reply to any and all comments. And don't forget to check out my book, Rhythmic Sight Reading, the TikATeeMethod. Okay, y'all, until next time, I'll see you in week 20.